Welcome to the Connor Cherland podcast, where I, Connor Cherland, meet up with a musician, hear about what makes them tick, what kind of experiences they're bringing to their musical journey. On today's podcast, we have Nate Salman, A.K.A. Waterstrider, an incredible artist, multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, creator. I've deeply admired Nate's work from afar for the past 3 years as they lived and worked out of Santa Barbara. Nate now lives back in Oakland, creating with enough Bay artists to fill a small phone book, or as they say in NorCal, hecka artists. You'll hear us talk about how to show your process, gender identity, being an artist, and continually learning how to keep a beginner's mind as you create art. Please enjoy Nate Salman, a.k.a. Waterstrider. How should I refer to you? Nate Salman, Waterstrider, what do you prefer?
Yeah, Nate Salman, Waterstrider. That's good. They, them pronouns, generally.
Wonderful. Okay, great. I really enjoyed listening to your vlogs of vulnerability.
Thank you.
Walking.
That's a new adventure that I'm going on, trying to start doing things like that.
Tell me about the journey of going from more of an enigma to wanting to show your work, wanting to show your process, show who you are as a person to the world on the internet, which is its whole other thing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, I mean, I went through some things, I should say, like a number of years ago regarding ego stuff, I would say. I, was signed to a major label at one point, and yeah, it was just kind of getting a little too much validation for my own good, I think. This is kind of a sidetrack, but it's important to the whole story, I think. And one of these vlogs of vulnerability will be about this whole thing that I've experienced. But yeah, all that to say, it was kind of like I had to go through this whole experience of completely losing track of why I was doing what I was doing, because I was doing it for the validation and for the, hopefully money, which I never ended up really getting that much money. But and then it was like, why am I doing this? This isn't even really making me happy anymore. And so I had to kind of come back to a place of like, I'm making music to connect with people.
Right.
Like, I'm not making music to be famous. I'm not making music to try and make a bunch of money. Like, the reality is, like, that was never really what I set out to do. It was like, initially it was like, I like writing songs. Like, I'm 14 or whatever, and I'm like, I'm gonna write a song. And then I got into like trying to record myself, and that was a whole fun hobby. Yeah. And then it was just kind of like, I like doing this too much to not do this all the time.
Yeah.
And what was your initial question?
The initial question is moving from enigma to being able to show your work, and a bit of that is letting go of ego. And what was that? What has that process been like of kind of coming home in a sense?
Yeah, it feels like I'm doing art. I'm doing like creative work as more of like a service than something that's meant to like fully, surface myself or whatever.
Yeah.
It's, and it always is something you're doing for yourself, obviously, but it's also like this kind of, it was like this big switch sort of that's been happening in my head of like, all I really want to do, especially these days, I'm living in the Bay Area, is just like connect all the people in the Bay Area that I know that are all these amazing artists and musicians and stuff, and just like get everyone in the same room or the same, as much as I can. Yeah, really trying to show up and just kind of like be really vulnerable. Because I think that's the best way to connect with people, basically. So yeah, going from doing things for myself to trying to have music always be like a way to connect with people. And I always say like, it's a way to start a conversation, essentially. So it's like writing a song, posting a video, playing a gig or whatever. It's like the moments I live for are not the moments when, I mean, they are the moments when you're on stage and stuff, because that is a connection as well. Yeah. But like, it's also just the moment of connecting with someone after the thing has been shared. Yeah. That they come back to you and it's like, this thing resonated with me in this way. And now, I feel a certain way, and it feels like you feel a certain way. And then you can have this like really interesting conversation about like what it's like to be human or something. Yeah. I think that's much more interesting than trying to write the next hit song or something. It's like I just want to like write music for, empathetic people or something.
Yeah. I
So
want to dig into this idea of doing it for yourself versus doing it as a service. In Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, Jerry Seinfeld, he talks about how you could do anything with your life. You could make a ton of money doing X, Y, and Z. And so actually giving your life to the arts is the most generous thing that you could have done to support the world, because there are plenty. That's the default is easier in some senses. And he was saying, like, I chose the hard thing so that you would have something. And he was like, so don't call me selfish for like pursuing this. But at the same time, he like, there is a degree of like, we write songs for ourselves primarily, like
absolutely,
in order to get something off of our chest, and you are trying to make it as good as possible to it's so hard to keep other people's standards outside of your mind.
Totally.
How do you combat that ongoing war between, am I really doing this for myself? Am I doing it for like that? It seems hard to navigate.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to navigate. It's a constant check-in process. I've gotten very into like a lot of techniques, especially like in songwriting specifically, where you're doing things so that you're not just like trying to write a song about X thing.
Yeah.
Instead, you're just trying to like channel something subconscious or something collective unconscious.
Yeah.
It's like a daily act of like trying to put something out there that feels external to what I'm actually doing. So that's like in terms of the actual like process of songwriting.
Yeah. What does it mean to like tap into the collective unconscious like that?
Right.
What does that look like?
Yeah, for me, yeah. I mean, I meditate every day, believe it or not, even though my brain is completely like, what, to this morning.
It's okay. You woke up late, it's all good.
Yeah. So that's a huge thing for me, is just kind of like, I feel anxious very frequently. So I'm always trying to let go of any kind of anxiousness or nervousness or sense of overwhelm, which is a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Just getting overwhelmed by stuff. And I feel like, like practicing this thing called object writing. I don't know if you've heard of this before. I got it out of this book called Writing Better Lyrics, which is a great book. Highly recommended. And it's basically you're writing, kind of free writing about an object for 10 minutes using your senses. It's kind of like two things for me. It's like a way of just vomiting words onto a page. And the more you do it, the more you kind of get in tune with your own sense engagement with the world. You're using your 5 senses, and then he talks about like 2 other senses, which are, I forget the exact names, but one's basically like your sense of your body moving in space and like the way your body's like interacting with the world around you, not just through your senses, but like through your like internal kind of body. Right. And then your like sense of your like internal body. So you have, sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, as well as these 2 kind of body-oriented experiences. So you take like an object, I don't know, pencil or something, like something. It can be totally anything. It could be like toenail. It could be, like, and then you set a timer for 10 minutes, and then you just go. And hopefully by the end of it, you have something interesting. And a lot of the times, I'll do things like that, and I'll do things like free writing or journaling. Really into like the morning pages kind of thing too. I don't do it necessarily regularly anymore. Yeah,
it's a lot. It asks.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
it is a lot. I highly recommend everyone do it. Yeah. I definitely highly recommend everyone do that at some point, just to like if you've never forced yourself to have a daily practice of some kind like that, where you're just getting stuff out.
Right. I
think it's super, super helpful. But now I sort of like will find these other types of techniques and things and be like, oh, I'm gonna do that for a while, and it fulfills the same kind of need to create something immediately at the start of the day.
You mentioned anxiety earlier. Is the anxiety revolving around the need to create something? Like right when you wake up, do you feel like you have to make something?
Yeah, I mean, it's that. A lot of the times it's also just like this giant list of things I have going. So
Gotcha.
it's like waking up and going like, oh, I need to reach out to those people that emailed me about that show, and then I need to reach out to that person that wants to collaborate on that song for the film thing. Oh, I need to schedule that booking, or I need to book that, recording session with this friend, and I need to, I'm trying to finish an EP right now of like all these collaborations with various artists that I know in the Bay Area and kind of outside the Bay Area as well. There's always this giant list, and I have like, a list in my phone, and I have a list in my notebook, and just lists and lists. I have like a thing on my wall here of like other stuff that's like bigger, longer term kind of things.
Sure. Yeah. That's
so
awesome.
For me, it's just like trying to keep track of, it's like, it's discipline. So much of trying to make this career path work for me has just been like discipline. Anytime I'm not disciplined about getting stuff done, here I am, right, showing up to this 30 minutes late. But, but all that being said, it's just discipline, and it's like trying to say no to things sometimes when I just do get too much on my plate. Like this morning is like I just had to be like, I need an extra 30 minutes because I'm just like a little too scatterbrained and a little too tired from the last 6 days of 12-hour work that I was doing, basically. So it's easy to get too much on your plate, I guess.
What do you like to say no to these days?
Ooh, what do I like to say no to? That's an interesting question. Because usually I just say yes to everything, and it's been a problem.
Right.
But
yeah. But it's good to find the thing that you don't want to do anymore.
That is true. I mean, a lot of it is kind of logistical type work, which thankfully I have like a friend who's also kind of acting as my manager. I mean, Technically he is my manager. It's kind of like we never signed a document or anything.
Sure.
We did sign a document that he's kind of like also helping me do kind of a label thing for this next release. So
cool.
Friend, manager, patron, all at once, collaborator as well.
Amazing.
We've been making all these videos together, but yeah, a lot of it's been like saying, it's not even necessarily saying no. It's like having someone to delegate things to.
Yeah.
Like,
which is a type of no. It's not.
It is a type of no.
It's not a yes on you.
Right. It's like it's a yes, but, or yes and. And most of I have all these amazing people up here that are like doing like a lot of sound engineers that are also amazing musicians. They're also, producers that are also live sound engineers that are also, we're all kind of like multifaceted musicians, I guess. So I'm using that crew a lot of the time to delegate things to, especially as we are building more and more projects up. It makes it easier to actually get things done. Like I have a record I'm producing with a friend of mine named Elena Shelton, who should get on here at some point. She's awesome. For that, it's like, I was like, maybe I'll mix this myself, and I'm like, no, I don't want to mix this record. I want to just produce it and then hand it off to like a bunch of my friends that are great at mixing and great at mastering. And as long as there's like some kind of budget for that, hopefully, then you can get it done. But even then, it's like I'm blessed with a lot of friends who get work that pays, but also want to do things just because they love to do it. And I'm the same way. It's like I probably half or more of everything I'm doing is probably more than that. Probably like 75% of the things I'm doing are just because I want to do them.
Wow.
And then you're like, well, if you happen to get some money along the way, it works out. And most of the time, when I've taken that mindset, it's way more lucrative for my soul, and way more, and it ends up being way more lucrative, like financially too.
Okay. That's great.
I don't know why. It's like I think it's a weird spiritual belief that, in like manifestation or something.
Yeah.
Along
bounty.
those lines.
Just belief in bounty.
Bounty. Yeah, exactly. Abundance. Yeah. My big thing in the last few years has been like, I was kind of operating from a place of like lack, like there's not enough to go around. And I think that was the big shift. What we were kind of talking about earlier was switching from, kind of an ego focused, like I need to get as much of this as I can. I need to get all the validation. I need to get all the money. I need to get all the whatever. It's my project. Everything is mine, and there's not enough to go around. And to switching to like, no. I'm going to do everything, or as much as I can, not everything, but as much as I can to just, be giving, knowing that like that will come back around in some capacity. Because every time I've taken that approach, it really does feed back in a beautiful way.
As a fellow anxious person, the resistance in my mind immediately throws out counter arguments. This is this is how I know I have a cognitive bias towards lack. The deep held belief, my limiting belief, as Tony Robbins would call it, is that I do not, and I will not have enough.
Yeah.
And the reason why it holds so well is, one, because I can give it a lot of evidence with the numbers in my bank account.
Yeah.
But there are times where that will shift and I will have more than what I need. But the belief will not change.
Right.
So when you are dealing with anxiety in a sense of, I think everyone desires financial security to some point, just not having so much that you don't know what to do with it, but at least having enough to take care of yourself. How do you move from a place of believing in lack to believing in enough or more than enough?
Yeah. I guess it's sort of a look at what has actually worked. For me, it's like the evidence is there that, like, as cheesy as it might sound, like magic sort of exists. And that when I've put, a lot of faith into things, a lot of belief that it's not even, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a feeling, like, I know this thing is the right thing to do. I know I'm like, it's like an alignment. It's like a sense of, I'm in alignment. I'm in alignment with the universe in this really profound way. It's like a sense of peace. It's a sense of super intense presence, like a major lack of fear. Just going like, I'm going to go into this from a logical standpoint. Like a lot of the time, it probably doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
If I was to view it from that lens, but because I have a really good feeling about this, I'm just going to go into it. And I found that as soon as you make that switch and you go, I'm going to go into this with pure intention to just do the best I can and see where this path leads for as long as I can go down that. Whether that means you go until you run out of money, or you go until something falls apart in that process, or you go until everything works out perfectly, which also happens beautifully. You just have to keep going as you do that. All these, I've been so blessed with all these like new friends that I've made along the way. Like even just in the last couple of years, it was like coming out of the pandemic, super intense pandemic. We're still in the pandemic, but coming out of the really intense shutdown period.
Right.
There was a connection with all these new people. I had moved back to the Bay Area after being out of here for like 2 years, and I came back kind of immediately. The pandemic started, and I had already been in a period of sort of isolating myself for like 2 years. And so my goal was to reconnect with all these people that I'd sort of, disconnected from.
Yeah.
So I came back, started to do that a bit, but ended up actually finding like a totally different group of people. And it was like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think the best way to find that kind of, that path is to just sort of let go. Like you let go of your expectations that it has to be a certain way, it has to look a certain way, that it has to make you a certain amount of money, that it has to like manifest in a certain way. And then usually I've found that it shows up and you're like, wow, this is that thing I was wanting, that I was looking for, I was hoping for, because I sort of let go of the idea that it ever had to happen. Kind of, it's a weird, I don't know how else to describe it, but I've read enough about these ideas of, like law of attraction and all that kind of stuff, alongside just like having my own experiences prior to that and alongside that, and then finding other people who are talking about these kinds of things and going like, especially in the creative community, I found it's like there's a huge amount of faith in what you're doing, and faith in service, and faith in the process, that it's such a process of letting go every time you're making any piece of art. If it's really like a piece of art that's being created from that like pure connected place, it's the best way that I can describe it. Yeah, it's just letting go. That's my big mantra.
It's so interesting to see how important the role of faith is in a like career in music. Like this idea of like, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I really believe that this is the way, and I'm going to walk in the way, and I'm going to be someone who walks in the way always. Yeah. And that's hard.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, it's like, as somebody who was not really raised very spiritual or anything like that as well, I've had to find a sense of, I mean, I use the term spirituality. It's kind of what I believe in, I guess. It's like not traditional organized religion sense of spirituality.
Sure.
It's
Spirituality
it's
is more of a general term, though.
Yeah, spirituality is a more general term. Yeah, there's just so much like everything I've done to get to where I'm at mentally, emotionally, and career-wise is like, so much of it has been like that sense of faith, that sense of connectedness to something that's bigger than me and my own little ego, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's what it always kind of comes back to from these days, is like, how am I doing this thing in service? How am I doing this thing and knowing that it's the right thing to do? It's like a sense of faith, of, I don't know, there's so many different ways to put it. It's like a sense of something bigger.
Yeah.
A sense of connected, like I've just been saying, connectedness, basically. Like, we're all here trying to connect with each other, I think, at the end of the day, especially after this whole last few years of intense isolation for like everyone, you know?
Yeah.
And I was already coming from that place of like, I kind of isolated myself to recover from some, you know, personal stuff and some health stuff and financial stuff. Like, everything sort of fell apart for me a few years ago. And it was like, once I took that time to regroup and started meditating every day and doing these things to find my path again, find my way on the path, even if the path is going through, you know, a super dark forest where you have no idea where the end point is or anything like that. It's like, there's something about like, I'm going to go into this and I'm probably going to end up on the other side, or I'm going to end up at some beautiful clearing or at some oasis somewhere. And, you know, I don't know how I'm going to get there. Really, I know there's a path that's sort of meandering through the woods, and it's sometimes it's totally clear, and you know, the trail workers have been keeping it nice and clear for me. And then sometimes it's like, oh no, I gotta bushwhack my way through this entire jungle, you know. I went on a metaphor tangent, but
No, you're good. Are you a fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender?
I am indeed.
There's that line, it's when Aang is with Uncle Iroh and they're walking, they're like building a tunnel into this like underground city, and he basically says that exact sentiment, and it's this visual that I keep in my mind a lot, where he's like, sometimes life is like this tunnel, it's dark and you don't know where you are, but as long as you keep going, and then he like crashes through into this like beautiful scene, and he goes, you'll end up in a better place. And that did you now I'm just giving Netflix recommendations. Did you watch Bo Burnham's Inside?
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
this is great.
That also follows the same path, it sounds like, that you've been on.
Yeah, I guess so, in some ways. I think like I still had, you know, lots of interactions with beautiful people, and I'm not discounting any of that either. I didn't lock myself in a room to make a piece of art. In fact, I did the opposite, I would say, in a lot of ways. I ended up going to Sweden and having this amazing time there for a month. This was like back in 2018, I think. Yeah, connected with the Winbergs. It's probably like Winberg, actually, pronounced properly in Swedish, but yeah, Pontus Winberg, who's like a amazing producer. Cool. That worked on like, you know, Toxic, and was part of like Mike Snow and stuff. It was like a really cool guy. The label I was on at the time flew me out over there, which was really sweet, just to kind of like meet up with this guy, meet up with Pontus, and just play around in his studio in the countryside in Sweden. It was like, it basically set me up. It made me realize like I'd already had this vision of like my ideal place to live and like what I would want my future to look like. And it was basically like, that was really important for me to go there and witness that he had created this whole kind of community, musicians who were basically all like working on each other's projects. It was kind of their big sort of extended network of all these like amazing artists. And then they'd have, you know, people like me that would come into town, and then they'd be like, oh yeah, my friend Nisa is going to come drum on your songs because he's really great, and I think that would be a cool fit. And oh yeah, I'm going to invite my friend who plays, you know, pedal steel, and he's going to come over for tomorrow. And he had like this, you know, guest house, so people could stay in the guest house for as long as they were working there or whatever. And there'd be a lot of just like us making like pizzas in his like pizza oven that was like built into the studio. And it was like, it sounds kind of like it's like this ridiculous thing, but it was actually pretty quaint in a lot of ways. Like it was like this old funky like schoolhouse building that he turned into a studio. And then he also lived there. And then he also had like one of the other schoolhouse buildings that he turned into kind of a guest room space. And it was just this hub,
Yeah.
this hub for all this amazing creative energy that was happening. And it made me
Yeah.
go like, that is what I want to make. Like, I want to have a place for people to come to. And it doesn't, like, I don't need to be the leader of it by any means.
Sure.
It's just like, I know that this vision of like this community of people who are all kind of like, buoying each other up. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Lifting each other up by providing them, work on amazing creative projects. And it's like this beautiful self-sustaining ecosystem of like joy and just inspiration. And it was such a beautiful thing. And then I also, like, while I was there, I met all these amazing Swedish music students. Did some work with them as well, so that was cool. It was like that was all through Pontus as well, because his assistant engineer was like a student at the I forget the name of the school, but in Stockholm basically. And like for the weekends he would like come work at Pontus's house as like his assistant, and then he would go back and do stuff at school. And it was very cool. I think it turned into like a real job, or kind of was a real job as well. But
sure,
he was great. Albin.
It seems very fitting that you'd be interested in that, since Waterstrider started in a student housing co-op. Right. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So like one of the things that I noticed about a co-op in college was like so many great things about it, like lower rent, but then there's also things like they want to do their own electrical work because they don't want to hire an electrician.
Right.
So there are lots of pitfalls as well.
Totally.
What are some things that you would really want to see? Like things that how do you want to iterate on the co-op structure, so like in order to make it more like this sorry, what was his name again? Pontus?
Pontus, yeah.
To make it more like Pontus's place and less like an 18-year-old running a co-op.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of maturity that just sort of comes with age, obviously.
True.
Age and experience. Like I live in a house right now with 6 other people.
Cool.
It's basically a mini co-op. It's not like an official co-op, but it's a community for sure. Like we can't deny this. We have chickens outside that we take care of. That's the true sign of a co-op, is if you grow your own eggs.
Yeah.
And hopefully your own produce. We don't have any of our own produce going right now because we've had a bit of trouble with our soil and stuff. But we do have a compost worm bin going.
Nice.
There's the sense of like trying to create little self-sustaining things. But I think that's kind of like what that's what the point of it is. I think to me is like you're creating a network that's sort of like feeding back on itself, and obviously feeding back to the bigger community as well. I think. I didn't even really think about it, but like until you said that, and I was like, oh, you're right. I'm trying to like, the thing I want to do right now in my career and in my community is like create like a music co-op, I think, or like an arts co-op. And in many ways, like I'm on the receiving end of that too, in terms of like I've found these amazing people to collaborate with and to kind of are like sponsoring my music basically to like keep me going right now. So I'm not making tons of money from streaming or like selling, merch or even playing gigs really. A lot of my sustainability right now is coming from like patrons, like people that are jumping in and saying, hey, I like what you're doing and I've got some money, so let me help you out,
That sounds incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, like I'm super, super, super blessed, and it's at least like bare minimum, it's allowing me to try out all these things right now. I'm trying to start, I did start this video project, this like YouTube project, making these kind of acoustic videos in the style of like La Blogotech or something like that, takeaway shows, where it's just a very simple video featuring Bay Area artists mostly, but then hopefully people that, come through town. If somebody's coming up here to do a show, I'll try to reach out to them and be like, hey, you want to go shoot this thing? Like no cost to you. It'll take some, a few hours. Hopefully we can pay you eventually. We're not quite there yet, but trying to make this like reasonably professional level video thing to feed back to both like the community that we have here, so that like hopefully if we build it enough and get enough artists kind of doing this thing, it'll create a network of like, oh, now I found this artist because I saw this video and I saw that, and then the artist also gets to have, a product, have a piece of content or whatever you want to call it that they can like use for their own promotional world and their own, sense of
which is really helpful.
Which is super helpful.
There's a lot of other questions I want to ask you. You seem so together, and I think that's one, because you meditate, and so there's just so much like general life advice that I want to ask you, because I feel like you.
Well, I'm honored. I was like having the opposite experience. I'm like, what am I talking about?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just rambling.
Well, but I mean, it speaks. I think it speaks highly to if you perceive yourself as an anxious person. I would just hope that you would know that I couldn't have picked up that in you.
Oh, that's sweet.
Within the amount of time that we've talked so far, which means that even if that's something that you've struggled with in the past, or like you continue to work through, like the work that you've done has really paid off.
Thank you.
And yeah, you show up to a place, it seems very in yourself,
Cool.
which is it's cool. It's nice to be around.
Thanks. I'm glad to hear that, because that makes me less anxious than I think I was actually a little anxious. It's interesting how you perceive yourself versus how somebody else perceives you, I guess.
Right.
So much is, and that's why I probably do all those kinds of exercises and practices, because it's like, well, hopefully this is helping, and I think if you can at least aim to find that sense of peace and presence and calm in your own world, then you hope that it's moving externally, I think,
right.
too. But I think
right.
Definitely sometimes I show up to things where I see myself on a video, or I see myself or hear myself, especially in like conversational environments like this, where I feel like I need probably more practice than I do maybe playing a show or something. It's I usually see myself and go, oh, I need to work on that.
Yeah.
But maybe that's kind of the beauty of it too, right? Is like we're all works in progress. As long as you kind of embrace that and go, I'm not a perfect person. Like, I know I've been saying like 1,000 times, because I do that a lot. And
Sure.
That's always something that, like, when I hear it come out of my mouth, I can usually go, oh, I did that thing, which is usually a sign that I'm not as present as I'd like to be, because I'm not able to avoid those, there's a filler. I need to keep talking.
Yeah.
So
I am good at editing. So you will be surprised the amount of ums that are removed.
Cool. Brilliant.
So you will sound smarter by default.
Brilliant. Thank you for making that happen.
I think it's important, because I think it's still all related to this idea of like moving from enigma to showing your work, and like
Absolutely.
part of showing your work is going through the awkwardness in your own self and putting yourself on the internet, and then your internal critic is like, you're fucking idiot. Look at you. Just look at you say things. And you're like, I was editing myself the other day in one of these interviews, and I was nervous. I knew I was nervous, but I didn't know how nervous. I watched myself ask a question to this guy, and then my mouth just goes and
That's incredible.
Like, I was so embarrassed watching myself that I had to like bring it up to my wife and be like, you have to see this. This is the craziest thing. I'm uncontrollably moving my mouth in nervousness after this question. And part of the ongoing practice I have to do is the practice of laughing at myself. You like have to detach and say, isn't that funny? Because it is funny. And isn't that good? Which it is good. Like,
right.
I am a goober sometimes who's just trying to talk and can't sometimes, which is funny because I'm 30, so you think I would.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 32. I get it.
Yeah.
Where, you're like, yeah, I'm an adult now. I'm supposed to know how things are figured out. But honestly, I don't know how I got to be 32 years old.
Yeah.
To the point where even like my mom, I remember when I turned, I think 31, she was like, happy birthday, Nate. Like, wow, I'm so, you're 30 now. And I was like, actually, that was last year. And I was like, okay. Yeah, she was like, what? No. How did I miss a year? I was like, well, the pandemic and anyway.
Basic math. It's hard.
Basic math. But yeah, there's no, we're always learning, It's like it's like what I was just saying a minute ago. You have to laugh at yourself. You have to know that you're imperfect. You have to, that's a big part of these videos I've been doing on like YouTube and stuff is
right.
we haven't done too many with other artists, but I've been doing a lot on my own. And like every time we do another video, I get that much more comfortable, in front of the camera, playing a song for a camera, or playing a song for my friend who's holding a camera, or playing a song for 5 people who are holding cameras. And that's you have to practice that sense of unease in order to start making it full of ease. In the same way that like everyone always talks about how you can't really practice for a show until you like practice the show, right. Or like you practice, you rehearse, you do all these things, and then you get on stage and it's like you're in a completely different place. Like it's like almost like you didn't even do the rehearsal you did, because it's such a different feeling and such a different sensation to actually be in front of people who are there witnessing you. It brings up this whole other, it's just a totally different feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the same way. It's like in conversation like this or something, you have to practice that too, because otherwise, you're going to be stumbling and you're going to make those mistakes. And it's a vulnerable process of being like, let me share what I know about something that I'm supposed to know things about. And then you're like, and then you start thinking about it and you're like spiraling like, oh, well, now I feel like I don't know anything. And what am I even talking about?
Right.
I probably sound like an idiot. You have all these like self-criticisms that pop up. And you have to just sort of go, I'm going to look how I'm going to look. I'm going to sound how I'm going to sound. Yeah. And that's a part of I called that thing the vlog of vulnerability for a reason. Yeah. Obviously, I've only done 2 so far, and they've been like a year apart. But the next one should hopefully be done in the next couple weeks. But maybe that's evidence too of like this gradual working. Like I bet you the times will get quicker between the videos. Like every time. It'll be like an exponential curve of. There's just a sense of like I'm trying to sort of put my mistakes out there. I'm trying to put all these things out there because when other people talk about these kinds of things, it's like actually super inspiring and motivating to me to be like, oh, like Tom York doesn't read music. Cool. So these books that I've been really into, which I think I mentioned in that video that you were in the vlog of vulnerability thing, these books by this guy, Austin Kleon, Steal Like an Artist and Show Your Work. I think it's in Steal Like an Artist. I can't remember which one it was, but he talks about how, there's a quote from Tom York and there's a quote from John Lennon as well. And they're both basically from this chapter about how the best, I mean, I don't really like that term. It's too like quantitative or something, but the most influential artists perhaps that we can think of, or a lot of the people that inspire us, usually approach things from kind of a beginner's mindset as much as they can, from an amateur sort of perspective, especially like when you're being an artist, which to me is like, that's another conversation that we could go down. It's just like trying to be an artist versus being like a musician, or trying to be a virtuosic musician, or trying to get really good at the thing that you do with your hands technically, or you're singing, or you're whatever. It's like, for me, it's more like, I just want to discover something new. I want to like be an amateur always, and always learning and always making mistakes for the rest of my life, and just learning from that. And hopefully like every once in a while I'll make the right mistake at the right time, so that things line up in a way where it's like, whoa, that mistake was actually a happy accident, like, and I've had enough of those experiences like that has happened. But you hope you can just keep making mistakes. And anyway, back to the quote. Tom York said something like, he had been asked like what's his strongest asset or something as a musician. He's like, it's that I have no idea what I'm doing. And I thought that was brilliant, because it's kind of the truth. It's like, if you can embrace that sense of like, things are going to fall apart, I'm going to just keep trying stuff with the assumption that I'm going to discover something interesting. And then, hopefully you press record at the right time. You capture that happy accident. Yeah. And then the John Lennon quote was something like, he said like, I'm an artist. So, if you hand me a tuba, I'll get something interesting out of it, even though I don't know how to play a tuba, like, I'm not viewing things from the lens of I've got to be really good at the thing before I can share the thing. Right. It's like, I just have to have faith that I have my own way of looking at things, and have my own sense of like connectedness to myself and sense of connectedness to whoever my audience might be, that I can then share that thing without worrying about the judgment, or worrying about being at some certain level of proficiency, or what, it's like, I don't know. I guess there is a certain level of just being good at something in order to also kind of have that faith that like, I write good enough songs that if I pick up, an instrument I don't play or something, I was trying to find like, I don't know, like write a song with like that being like the foundation, like, whatever, like do something that's abnormal from your regular routine, outside your regular routine. kind of force yourself to not know what you're doing, I think is a really healthy practice. A lot of the best songwriters are always like, pick up an instrument you don't know how to play. Now write a song, because you're going to get something more interesting than falling into your same patterns. It's kind of like it's kind of like the anxiety thing too. It's like you fall into these patterns of thought that spiral out of control, and it's like, how do you get out of that?
Right.
Well, you have to, I don't know, you have to just like, you just have to move through it, sort of.
Yeah. Be able to introduce something new, or to be able to notice the pattern and then choose something different, even if it's in the same medium. Exactly. Normally what I would do is I would start here because that's the easiest chord.
Right.
So I'm going to purposefully find a chord that I don't play ever.
Right.
And then we're going to work backwards from there.
Yeah. Like for me, a big thing in the last couple of years is like I finally started like tuning my guitar to some weird stuff. You know, just going like, okay, that's an interesting chord. Let's see if that does anything. I got really inspired by like Adrian Lenker from Big Thief. Yeah, just started trying out weird tunings, and every once in a while just having a guitar usually around that's my guitar that I can tune to anything, and I know the strings are going to break and it might mess the neck up or something eventually, but like this mindset of like, let's just keep a guitar in some not standard tuning so that when I pick it up, I always think it's in standard tuning and try to do something, and then some horrible sound comes out of it. And then I go, oh, right, I have to relearn how to play this. And it's like immediately there's usually an idea that I wouldn't have if I started strumming a G chord or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, part of the artist way also talks about like take a different route home.
Yeah.
Like you always drive the same way, so try getting there some other way and see what happens. So many more questions, but I also want to be thoughtful of your time because we're at the hour. Are you interested in playing a song?
Sure. Yeah, I can do my best. Yeah, sure. I'll play Sublimate. Let's see how. Get this out of me. Get the string out of your face, Nate. So this is part of it, you know. You got to embrace the awkward moments as much as the really professional ones. Actually, I think we might put out a video this week of this song.
Nice.
Talking about vulnerability. The end of it is I just mess up. Maybe I won't mess up today. But it was like such a good take up until this like one moment, and the video was really beautiful. And we were both like, I know we did another take where I got it. I'd played it technically right all the way through.
Right.
But we were actually like, I think I like the less technically right one where it just falls apart at the end, and then I go like, whoops, well, there we go, you know. And it's just like, I think that's a big part of me. It's like, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
There's too much of
perfect, but there's magic there.
There's magic, and it's like that's all I really care about. I think that's the big sharing. The big sharing thing is just we're all imperfect.
Yeah.
And I think when you get the assurance that that's okay, that's really nice. And I don't think I've had enough engagement, specifically with a lot of musicians, where I feel like they're that vulnerable. Like I'm thinking, like I just read Jeff Tweedy's book about songwriting, and I feel like he is fairly vulnerable in that, which I appreciated. But anyway, I could go on, but yeah, it's just this will be what it is. We're in a moment here.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna I'm gonna try and drop into my little world, and we'll see what happens.
We'll see where we land.
See where we land, you know? Might be here, might be on Mars, might be under the ocean. I love the videos you're making, by the way. I didn't get to say that, but it also feels like, oh, cool. Somebody else is trying this kind of like vulnerable, like, here's what I've learned the hard way kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We need more of that. We need more of that kind of like, hey, we're all just trying to make it work. And yeah, I know you see the superstars who seem like they got everything together and this and that, but it's like there's way more of like the working musicians or working artists that are like making it happen day to day, you know, aren't in the limelight. And, and they don't get to, and if we were to try to curate the whole thing and be an enigma to finally answer your very first question, you know, if we were to try and if we were to try to curate everything that we're doing to try and be this sort of like enigmatic perfect sort of being from another world, which is how I would love to be viewed in some view of myself. Yeah. It's like it's actually like it's much more rare to see someone just be a weirdo and and be themselves and be, you know, and that being said, I think a lot of the people that have been really, really, you know, successful on, you know, a financial level or whatever, usually coming from some pretty good spot of authenticity, you know? Yeah. Authenticity. I think it's just, yeah. All right, I'll play music now. That's what I'm
for
supposed
it.
to do, right?
Go for it. Go for it.
We'll get it. It'll be what it is. It's fine.
Yeah,
Here we go.
You're good.
All right, intro. Sleeping now, naked in the sun, bare bones. Now no harm will come. Open, mercy set me free. Burden of my memories. Slow down, be wise. Don't strain to shut your eyes. You've lost control. This heaviness you hold, lay the cards 1,000 times, turning over in my mind. Fictions keep me in my place. Desire, I burn and sublimate. Slow down, be wise. Don't strain to shut your eyes. You've lost control. This heaviness you hold, violence, pull me apart at the seams. I am only awake in my dreams. I'm flying high above you. High above
Woo.
See,
Well done.
Even when you're playing the song, you still got to hit that one wrong
Yeah,
chord
but it's
every
all
once in a
good.
while. That's what I'm
feels
saying.
good.
I'm like, that's great. You know, it was good
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
I felt in it enough.
Yeah.
You know, you're trying to get the magic. One funky chord's not gonna
No.
end the magic. You know.
No, it doesn't take from you.
No, it doesn't. So, yeah,
That was awesome.
It was a good
That's,
example.
Your voice is so beautiful.
Thank you.
It is so hard to tell where your falsetto begins and like where your chest where your chest lives and like where the falsetto lives. I'm like, at certain points the lines get really blurry at certain points. No, it just really speaks to the work that you've done to bring them together, like into this place of like one tool versus two tools. That
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole conversation there about gender identities and things like that too, which is definitely a big part of, I think, why I sing the way I do. That's kind of a more recent, I guess, like real affirmation of myself in terms of just being like, yes, I was born in this male body, and that's totally cool. I don't have a problem with my body really.
Yeah.
But I think I've always gravitated, for one thing, like musically and artistically, towards people that tend to straddle the lines between gender stereotypes or something. Like I love Prince. I really love Anoni as well. There's a whole bunch of I mean David Bowie, like
Yeah.
these a lot of these different artists that I guess were also like AMAB people.
What was the term you just used?
Oh, AMAB, assigned male at birth.
Oh,
Yeah.
AMAB. Okay.
Yeah. There's a whole conversation about, I have been trying to sing like a woman probably since I was 14 or something, just because I was like, that was what I was listening to. I was obsessed with either like male singers who were using their falsetto really intently,
Yeah.
or like it was definitely a focus, like Jeff Buckley, Tom York, Yonsi from Sigur Rós. And then alongside that, it was also like I was getting obsessed with, Nina Simone and Billie Holiday and a woman named Cheryl Warden, who's like, she makes music as My Brightest Diamond. I spent a lot of time when I first started driving, so I guess I was technically 16. I was like driving to high school in the mornings and then just trying to sing like every note of whatever recording I was listening to at the time.
Right.
And that was like how I would start my days, is just like listening to 20 minutes of whatever, and just I would either like make up harmonies or try to just sing every note the way they were singing every note, and like try to sound like them. Like it wasn't just like, oh, get the notes right. It was like try to get whatever their tone is as well, at least from whatever I could hear, without like then getting into recordings, a whole different thing, because you hear your voice a different way. But yeah, it's been a lot of like vocally, I've been trying for a long time to just find my voice, I guess, on some level.
Right.
And I think there's always a sense of like, I've had moments where I felt like, oh yeah, I'm really singing within my full range or singing within my full being. And then there's been other times where, yeah, it's been a little more forced, but I haven't released most of those songs, so because they didn't feel authentic, right?
Yeah.
It's a multi-layered story but that's a big thing for me, has been, yeah, kind of an exploration of fluidity, gender fluidity via music for a long time. Kind of only the last few years, like even having the vocabulary to be like, oh, this is something I've felt and something that I identify with, which I haven't talked a lot about publicly, I guess. But in my private world, it's been a big thing, and I'm trying to be more out about it.
Yeah. It was
yeah.
It was our common friend Gabriella. I asked her if she had any questions that I should be asking you about, and this was one of the topics that was mentioned. So I'm glad that it came up organically, because I think that music is a more kind of culturally allowed place for people to explore this. Not that that's good or bad, but just that it's been allowed for a longer period of time. So there's large examples of trailblazers before us to be able to pull from and pull inspiration from and pull a sense of community around what's allowed in this world. And it feels, I think that that's a cool part of music that maybe a lot of other artists don't get to have.
Absolutely. It was very affirming for me when I first started releasing songs, when like I had a 4-piece band at the time, and all the press photos were generally of like the 4 of us, and my good friend I haven't touched base with in a while, but she's amazing, Brigitte Murphy, who makes music as Brigitte. Her own music is fantastic. She's like an incredible singer, percussionist, person.
Yeah.
She was like the one kind of like female person in the band. Yeah, so we'd have these photos of us, and then we'd always get these responses from people like, wow, the female vocalist is incredible, and because they just assumed she was like the vocalist, but actually she was like the percussionist. She was doing a lot of the rhythms, that was always like, I was like, yes, because I felt like it just felt really good to not to trick people, because I don't feel like I'm tricking people, but it's more like, to just know that like I can be seen in these different ways, through different lenses, sort of. And like music was the one way where I was like, I really want to be like feminine in music a lot of the time.
And that, I mean, as someone who also enjoys Jim Henson, like that's one of the great things about puppeteering is like
absolutely, yeah.
Puppeteering is you just get to be this other thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's totally allowed in our culture where it's like just this other place of like, and then you can put a puppet on your hand, and then you can be that other thing that you are.
Right. It's like Frank Oz is Miss Piggy. Most people don't know that. So it's like Yoda and Miss Piggy, same person. Like,
it's incredible. We all right, we're gonna have to sign out soon. So I'm gonna ask you one more question, then we're gonna log out. Any inspirations in your life? Any person that you see as a role model? Anyone that you're like looking to and saying like, I'm actively trying to emulate this person? Doesn't have to be musical. You can say like Jim Henson or...
I mean, Jim Henson's a very good example. Kind of just want to say Jim Henson, but but there's like, it's so multifaceted, you know. It's hard for me to pick one person. I mean, somebody that I really admire and who I actually got to meet very briefly, and I've never talked about this. I wanted to make a video about this at some point too, so why not? Let's put it on here for now. Sure. Maybe I'll do the video at some point too. And maybe we can actually reconnect at some point in the future. Who knows? But there's this artist named Aurora from Norway. I went to her show a few years ago in LA. It was like 2018, 2019 maybe? No, probably like 2018. I don't remember. Anyway, I went with Gabriella, actually, who you mentioned. Gabriella is a magical person anyway. And she was like, so we're going to go hang out with like Aurora after this show. And I was like, what? You can't just like say that. That's a weird thing to say. Like, I don't know this person at all. Like, I admire her as an artist and also just as an individual. She seems like a very authentic, unafraid, kind of unabashedly weird person. And like watching like interviews of her, it's like very inspiring to just be like, wow, there's a person who just like does her own thing in her own world and doesn't care what other people thinks, you know? Yeah, we went to this show and then afterwards, we basically ended up befriending the opening band, who were this band called Talos. I was like, I almost forgot their name. Yeah. They're called Talos, and they're from Ireland. And I ended up playing a show with them later on, too. So that was a whole other thing. Cool. I got to open for them. But yeah, we befriended Talos, and then they were like, oh, come hang out at this bar with us afterwards. And so we went to this bar at this like hotel, and it was like Talos and Aurora and her band and some other, friends and fans, I guess, maybe that they'd felt connected to it, that they invited to this little hang. It was very lovely. And it was just I ended up like talking with her bandmates a whole bunch, and they were very, having nerdy conversations about what the bass player was playing, because I was like, you're playing like a 6-string, was it a baritone guitar or whatever? He was like, no, it's a bass 6. And then I talked to like drummer, who's this guy named Magnus. I'd reached out to via my publisher a while back to try and like do some work with him, like producing and stuff, because he's a producer as well. He produces a lot of Aurora stuff as well. Talked to her, like her bandmate who like sings backup and plays keyboard and stuff, and it was like she was doing, I had like my little individual conversations with each of them that were like more on the like nerdy side, like, oh, we're having a conversation, we're musicians, like we're doing, and then finally I was like, okay, like I'm gonna talk to Aurora for a second. And my interaction with Aurora was, I was like, oh, thank you so much for the show, like really really appreciate it, it was really inspiring and all that kind of stuff. And I was kind of nervous, kind of anxious at the time, was not meditating every day like I started to, but that's part of the story. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. She like reached out her hand. We like shook hands and held hands for like a kind of an awkward amount of time to me. I got really like nervous. Yeah. And she stared like straight in my eyes no word. She never said a word to me as far as I remember. It was just like, she just stared me straight in the eyes, and I like saw her world for a second, like through her eyes. Yeah. And she just held my hand, and we just looked at each other like in silence for what felt like an eternity. It was probably like 30 seconds, but it was, it felt like 10 minutes or something. And I was just like completely overwhelmed. And the only thought I was having at that point was like, where is that? Like, how do you get there? Yeah. Like, so I was like looking in her eyes and just going, I want to know how to get to wherever you're kind of operating from. Like, how do I get to your world? How do I get to that world? How do I find my own version of that or something? Yeah. Because I was like, I wasn't born into this. It seems like you were born in this way of operating and way of navigating things that's just like very effortless, transcendent, very transcendent. And it was like, I, didn't expect that. I expected like most of the meetings I've had with like other people that I've been very inspired by over the years. It's always been like very like, oh, great, you're just a human like me, and you're. Yeah. And this was like the one time I've really like met one of meet your heroes or whatever. Yeah. But met one of my heroes and sort of went like, you're different than the other people.
Yeah.
Like, not to play favorites or anything like that, but it's just
Yeah.
like that had a very deep impact on me. So basically I like walked away from that experience and then went back home and was just like, I'm gonna meditate every day.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like, and I'd already been into meditation a bit and stuff over the years and into, you know, having spiritual practices and things, but that was the moment when I was like, if there's one thing I can learn from this interaction, from this person, it's that like I can go deeper.
Yeah.
Basically I can
That's
go
amazing.
deeper and I can be more vulnerable and I can show up that present with a stranger every time, you know. That's the goal, kind of.
Yeah.
So it became, so
That's
yeah,
amazing.
Aurora is a super huge inspiration on me in that way. I mean, her music's
Kudos.
fantastic too, but yeah, that was a pretty pivotal moment in the last like 5 years of my life.
Thank you kindly for listening to the podcast. It's really just an excuse for me to meet amazing people and learn from them. So if you like this episode, feel free to take a look at some of the other artists I've talked to, or let me know if there's someone in your life who's a musician that you'd like me to talk to next. You can learn more about my music at connorcherland.com or find me on Instagram or Spotify under Connor Cherland, ConnerCherland. All right, see ya.